Right, guys, so it's been a while since we've talked about tips that aren't techniques in jiu-jitsu. I wanted to take this opportunity. I'm down until next Monday, recovering after a brief minor surgery that I needed. A lot of you are probably brand new to jiu-jitsu or you've been doing it for a few months, and I want to make sure I'm giving you guys not just techniques, but the right mindset to ensure your success. So if you're new to jiu-jitsu, you're in the right spot. These are things that should have been put into your mind before you started training, but that doesn't always happen. I got you covered. Let's dive in. Tip number one is realizing that you're a beginner. White belts so often come into jiu-jitsu expecting that they're going to do really well, right? And that's probably because you have other areas of your life that you can perform well at. Maybe you're really good at your job. You're really good at another sport. Maybe you're good at lifting, right? You have this false expectation of success and you start as a new belt and then you get humbled really quickly. And oftentimes we see people quit before they even ever get started. They come for a week, they spend all week getting destroyed and they want to quit, and then they do quit. You have to remember that as a white belt, you are a beginner. And what does it mean to be a beginner? You don't know what's going on. You don't know what to do. You don't know which way is up and which way is down, to be honest. And this is one of the reasons I love jiu-jitsu, because once you get through this phase, you can really apply this idea to anything in life. Whether you're starting a new business or starting a new relationship, when you're new at something, you're a white belt. And it's crazy to think that you would be able to perform at a level that you would consider proficient as a white belt or a beginner. So instead of expecting yourself to be really good and really proficient at jiu-jitsu, or maybe even just winning a little bit more than you expected, what I want you to perceive is that your job is to lose. As a white belt, as a beginner, you will lose a lot, especially if you stay committed to the journey. And that's a part of the process, which a lot of people don't like. And it's not that the person themselves doesn't like it, it's the ego. It's your ego that doesn't like it. And truly in jiu-jitsu, you will go through various levels of ego death at times. I know I did. When I first started jiu-jitsu, I came in as a wrestler and I was powerlifting at the time. So really heavy 1-rep maxes. And I remember coming in being bigger than most everybody in the class and thinking I was going to run through everyone. And because I had years of wrestling experience, they did let me spar. And I got absolutely wrecked by a guy who was like 40 pounds less than me. And he looked a little disheveled, to be honest, but he wrecked me. And in my mind, I knew I couldn't give up now. Like, if he could do that to me, imagine what I could do to someone else if I learned this stuff, right? That's the stance I want you to take. I don't ever want you to go to this class, go to jiu-jitsu, you get whooped, and you're like, this isn't for me. Everybody gets whooped in the beginning. It's the people who stick with it who are the ones that really get to benefit from this beautiful martial art. So try not to let your ego dictate your next move. Try not to let that damaged little man inside of you that says you're the shit, try not to let him dictate your next move, because if you do, the next move is probably not coming back. Things you can focus on as a white belt, while you are going through this process of losing all the time, is focusing on your defense. Truly, as a white belt, you're developing your defensive game. So maybe one day you count how many times you get submitted, and let's say it's 10 times. Your goal for the next class, only get submitted 9. The next class, 8. The next class, 7. Things like this, right? Make it a game to yourself. It doesn't always have to be you're submitting another person for you to win. You need to create parameters for yourself that allow you to track progress without necessarily having to get a submission, because especially new white belts, you're probably not going to see too many submissions. You're probably not going to be landing too many submissions. And in doing that, it makes losing a little bit easier to deal with because you have a trackable element of those losses. I remember when I first started doing this and I initially was getting tapped 10 times a class. And when I was down to 5, I'm like, I'm getting tapped half as much, consistently half as much as I was before. And even though I was still losing, I was losing much less, and it made me feel good. It made me realize that my defensive game that I was developing and working on was starting to work. All of a sudden, the blue belts that were tapping me all the time, maybe I could go a whole round without getting tapped at all. Really, maybe it was the purple belts, the brown belts, and the black belts that were handing out all the whoopings. And certainly, maybe the other white belts couldn't tap me at all, right? It's such a beautiful thing that you can focus on when you don't let the idea of submitting another person blind you from your own progress. You have to remember that jiu-jitsu is a really complicated martial art. It's a very in-depth martial martial arts. And if your only measure or way to track your progress is by counting submissions that you get, you are essentially setting yourself up for disaster, especially as a white belt. Alongside considering your defense, you should be considering escaping positions, holding positions, learning positions, right? Don't expect yourself to perform like a purple belt when you're brand new to this. If you go buy a new car and you just got your temporary license and you still have to have an adult sitting in that passenger seat while you drive, do you think you're gonna drive that car like Jeff Gordon? No. You're gonna be really stressed out at all of the indicators on the road and all the things you have to pay attention to on the dashboard, and God forbid an ambulance goes by you. But after you've been doing it for a while, it becomes second nature. Jiu-jitsu is the same way. I've been training jiu-jitsu for 9 years almost. I'm a brown belt, and I don't have to think about what I'm doing. It's just reactions that are taking place based off what my opponents are doing. And you will get there too, as long as you allow yourself to be a white belt. Don't focus on those submissions, focus on the defenses, the positions, and the escapes, and you'll do just great. The next tip I can give you white belts that isn't a technique is your breath. Now, your muscles require oxygen to operate efficiently, optimally. Many of us, especially when we're new, we hold our breath a lot when we roll. And I think it comes from weightlifting, but even then, people who've never weightlifted before, I still catch new people holding their breath. You want to initiate a big move, whether it be an escape, a takedown. I see people take a big breath in and then they hold it. And then also grunting, right? If I hear you grunting, I know you're probably holding your breath to some degree. And what you're doing is you are starving your muscles of fresh oxygen and you are ruining the optimization of your athletic performance. Even taking me for an example, I think I have a unique ability to remember my white belt days much more clearly than most people, which is one of the reasons why I like to focus on white belt content, is I don't see a lot of people doing it. But I can remember holding my breath, thinking it would give me more power. I'm bracing to make big moves, and I've always kept myself in great shape, muscularly and cardiovascularly. And not being able to figure out, why am I gassing out so much in jiu-jitsu? Nothing makes me tired like jiu-jitsu. I gas out so hard in jiu-jitsu. It's because I was holding my breath, okay? And that's not to say that I don't get tired anymore. I do get tired, but I very rarely gas out completely. And even if you look at the highest level grapplers, you have two extremely high level guys going at it. It's very rare to see one of them completely gas out. It's because they're so efficient with their breathing. They're not holding their breath at all. They know how to breathe through effort. This is something that you can start to incorporate into your game right now. Whether you're doing warm-ups, you're doing drills, you're doing conditioning class, you're sparring, pay attention to your own breath work. This is something that we don't pay attention to because in everyday life, we don't have to. Breathing is automatic. We don't have to think about it. But if you are in a combat sport, specifically jiu-jitsu, and you're not making an effort to breathe through all of the things that you were doing, you will gas out faster than you should. And you might be thinking, well, I've never noticed that I'm holding my breath. How would I know? There's a couple ways to tell. Pay attention to what you're doing with your breath when you're trying to get out of mount. Someone's mounting you. Are you bridging and bucking and holding your breath at the same time? What about trying to bench press people off you, which is a normal white belt response, but it's a good way to see if you're holding your breath or not. When you're stuck on bottom, are you holding your breath when you're using your arms in a bench pressing motion? Are you grunting a lot? You're holding your breath if you're grunting. So these are little signs that you can pay attention to. Just being more aware of what your body's doing when you're grappling. That's one of the things I love about jiu-jitsu, is it really connects you to what all of you is doing. You become much more aware of what your entire body is doing. Especially as a white belt, you're probably only concerned with your waist up. I remember middle of my blue belt, certainly by purple belt, I was very aware of what everything was doing, to include my lower body. And I'm someone who's coming from a wrestling background. So specifically those of you who have never even trained a grappling art at all, like wrestling, I could bet that most of you aren't paying attention to what your entire body's doing, to include your breathing. And on that same note, as you progress and as you begin to pay attention to your own breathing, another thing you can do is begin to pay attention to your opponent's breathing. Now, this is a tip that I really like to focus on, because you can learn a lot about your opponent and how they feel based off how they're breathing. From my perspective, when I roll with white belts, especially brand new white belts, you can see that their breath work goes from calm to escalated very quickly. Their breathing is very deep and frantic. They almost sound like they're fighting for their life, even though it's in a safe, controlled environment. And you'll notice that there's a lot of grunting. And I can even see in real time that they're holding their breath at times. Now, the higher you go on the belt system, the less you see that. By the time you get to black belt, it's like making a cup of coffee for them, right? Very calm, very chill. It's just something that they do. And that's something to aim for. Now, I also know, based off how you're breathing, if I should push or if I can be reserved. And a lot of times, especially if I'm competing, if I can tell you're really out of breath because I'm paying attention to how you're breathing, I'll push you a little bit more if I know that it's for my benefit. And that's what's interesting, is that jiu-jitsu is very much chess with energy expenditure. You don't necessarily have to be a really athletic person to do well. You just need to be smart with your energy consumption, and breath work is directly attached to that. So if I know you're more out of breath than me, I know you're more tired than me, it's maybe worth it for me to chase the rabbit a little bit, right? Really get your back against the ropes and put you in a place where you may have to breathe even harder to escape what I'm trying to do. So there's a lot of benefits when it comes to breathing. Certainly getting yours under control and making sure you're not holding your breath, but also paying attention to how your opponent is breathing, because their breathing will tell you a story about how they're doing. And that can help you formulate an in-game strategy based off of it. Something to think about as you progress through the system. If you aren't focusing on your breath work and your opponent's breath work just yet, start to initiate that process now, because it'll help you out big time. Now, this last tip is going to help you all stay in the game a bit longer, right? And that's tracking progress. A lot of times white belts don't know how to track progress because they're associating success with getting submissions. But as a white belt, what submissions do you really know? Everything you're seeing is brand new. And to expect to hit something that's brand new for you on someone who's been seeing it for years is insane. That's not how it works, right? So you need other elements to track progress. And one big thing I remember from when I was a white belt is that maybe I learn a sweep, maybe I learn a submission. I certainly can't hit that in a live roll. But you're gonna get to a place where you start recognizing the opportunity to hit these moves. Maybe not necessarily able to act on it quickly enough, but you see a little window like, oh, I definitely could have hit a sweep there. I saw the opportunity for it. Or, oh, in that moment where we were rolling, I saw an opportunity for a straight ankle lock or maybe an arm bar. I saw that opportunity. I just couldn't act on it. This is a clear sign that you are progressing. So if you were basing success off of landing submissions, you still be at ground zero. But because now you've given yourself another pursuable element, such as noticing opportunities, you've given yourself a way to track progress. And that's a big one. So try not to beat yourself up if you're not landing anything, but you're seeing opportunities, because that is definitely a clear sign of progress. If you guys have other ways of noticing that you're making progress, drop them in the comments, because like I say, people come through these comments and you don't know how many people you could help with the one thing that you've noticed. We're building a community here where we all help each other. So I always appreciate you guys. Yeah, I'll be probably filming from here for another week. I'm in my backyard. I got to take it easy for a little bit. So believe me, I'll be back to it as soon as I can. With that, you guys know how we like to end them. Sometimes backwards, always forwards. I'll see you in the next one.